Well, hey, my name's Eric Marquez, and in the studio today, I have two great men that I respect very highly. I got first Pastor Danny Lopez from
Here.
New Life Community Church, East Humboldt Park.
Humboldt
That's a
Park.
long name, man.
Come on, man.
Right?
Yeah, it's got depth.
I mean, if
It
you want to
has
learn the
depth.
alphabet, learn how to say
Come
the name
on.
of your church.
Yeah.
There you go, right? And then we got Pastor John Palmieri, the man.
Hey, great to
man.
be
The
here with
legend.
Yeah.
you today,
Yes.
Eric. And
And
Theo.
you're New Life Elgin, right? New Life Community Church in Elgin.
That's right.
All right, cool.
Yes.
So I got a kickoff question, right? This is all about restarts. We're going to be talking about restarts, and for our listeners, just kind of everything that we've learned as a church over the last couple decades, right? To kind of give away, to help anybody that might be in that situation, or to learn about that situation, and maybe just give some wisdom so they can navigate what we've learned maybe from hitting our head a couple times, right? But as we kind of open up this idea, and we're gonna talk about what are restarts and things like that. But what excites you about talking about restarts and giving what we've learned away? Any one of you guys?
The reason why I really like talking about this topic is because as I'm working closer in communities, I'm seeing that churches that have been there for 100, 125 years, they're shutting down or they're being turned into condos or lofts. Thank God that we can come in and bring fresh life, fresh vision into something that had been established, but throughout the years has started to die.
Yeah.
But we insist on not allowing what God had started to die. So this excites me because we're moving forward and we're going into we're raising up a new generation of people, or we're bringing a new season into a community that needs Jesus. So we refuse to let anything die.
Yeah, I like that. What about you, John?
Well, Eric, I just want to say it's great to be here with you guys this morning.
Yeah.
Two handsome young lads.
Thank you.
I get to be here with a little bit of gray hair on the chin.
I'm getting some. I just shaved it off.
I've earned each one of these gray hairs, most of them from restarts. I'm just kidding. But no, I do get excited. I've been part of New Life for 30 years and have been involved in restarts, been able to plant really about, technically four, you could arguably say five if you go back to our 44th and Paulina days.
Yeah, because that was all you, right?
Yeah, right, of course, right. It's always been me. No, that's another story. Hopefully we'll get there. But what I get excited about when we talk about restarts, and I'm sure we'll define restarts here in a little bit, but I'm an evangelist at heart. And whenever I can talk about how to revitalize the church, I know that the end game is going to be making disciples and bringing glory to our awesome God, right? And so that's why I get excited about it, because I know if we can get churches to a healthy place, that's God's primary design to win the world to Jesus Christ.
Amen.
The local church.
And so, the local church. But there's also other things, too, that I get excited about. Here's an opportunity to plant a church, to revitalize the church so that there's a center of hope and a lighthouse in a community. Also giving an opportunity for a young pastor to join on board with the New Life team, where he's a part of a team and he's able to jump into a pastorate where he's not all by himself. So it's a great on-ramp, so to speak, to the pastorate, really. In a lot of ways for young pastors to jump in, and they're not all by themselves, but they're put in a location. The church is happy because they got a pastor. The pastor feels supported. He's got a team around him. He's got admin. He's got guys that he can kind of unwind with on a Monday when we have our staff meetings and that kind of thing. So all of it together, I think full circle is what gets me excited. I just think it's a great approach to church health.
Yeah. I like that. I think you nailed it right on the head. We want to start with what is a restart, right? And so, John, if you could take us back, as you said, you've been here for 30 years, at New Life Community Church. You've seen it all, man. You were there, and I know I was there too, but I was a lot younger and a lot.
You were in my wife's Sunday school class.
Yeah. I wasn't much taller than I am now, but I mean, but I was young, And but talk to us about what is a restart. How is a restart different from some would call it a merge or a church plant. Define for us what a restart is. Maybe even tell us how New Life stumbled upon that terminology and came upon that. Just kind of give us a big picture.
Well, a restart in simple terms is really just a continuation of something that God's already begun a long time ago, before New Life ever arrived on the scene. But a church who has, for various reasons, come on some hard, difficult times. So, and for various reasons, we could talk about those. But what a restart is coming back in and revitalizing a church so that it becomes more relevant to the community. And when I say relevant, I don't just mean relevant to make the community feel good, but I'm talking about relevant in the sense of making a difference in the community, bringing a real message of hope and restoration and healing into a community, and of course salvation. So that's what a restart is in simple terms. How we stumbled into it, I think that's kind of a good way to put it, because we've never really intentionally sought out and knocked on doors to do restarts. We've always kind of looked for what we call God activity. What is God doing? And how can we cooperate with what God is doing? So oftentimes it'll be a phone call, or it'll be a relational connection somehow. We don't have this corporate plan where we go out and knock on doors and try to claim territory or anything like that. It's just so anti-New Life. I mean, it's not how we really look at how God's doing it and how he can put it together. We the very first restart, which we didn't call it a restart back in those days, that terminology, restart, multi-site, that terminology wasn't even in existence. We just knew that there was a church in back of the yards on 44th and Paulina that had about 17 people, that had come across some hard times. It had a good, rich faith history, which most of the restarts that we do have. But it was a church that was struggling. And the story is in our God Was Already Here video. People can tap into that and take a look at it to get the more detail. But the short story is that Mark Job came in, who was my roommate at Moody. Yeah, I discipled him and led him to the Lord and baptized him.
Thank you for that,
super
too,
proud
man.
of my
Thank
disciple.
you for that, you know.
That's what makes you so great.
That's right. But he came in and started working with the church. The church over just a short period of time started really growing, moving from that 17 people to just a lot of people. I joined in about a year and a half in, and several other guys from Moody, a bunch of us that went to Moody started just jumping in and doing ministry. We were young. We were in our 20s. We had a lot of energy. Really didn't know what we were doing, to be quite frank. We just loved Jesus, and did a lot of church. But that really was a restart in a lot of ways. It was a pre-existing church with faithful people, faithful praying people that were holding it together. A small band of older ladies were praying every Wednesday. They would gather together and they'd pray hard and seek God and ask for God to move in this church that had deep historical faith roots. And over time, the church began to grow and grew out of that building, and we started asking questions about what it would look like to reach the city, and that's when my family actually started coming to New Life. My mother took us to that little church in 44th and Paulina. Yes, I was about 4 or 5 years old when we started going there. I remember you. You were in my wife's Sunday school class, actually.
I remember that.
And great family, great God story right there.
Yeah.
And you take that story and multiply it over and over and over again, and you begin to start to see how God took this little church that he didn't give up on, and it was at a place where it was ready to make a move. And again, we weren't thinking restart. We were just thinking lead people to Jesus, love people, love God. Yeah. And it kind of blossomed into this thing. But that same kind of mentality, I think from the very beginning, a mentality of what is God doing and how can we cooperate with him?
Yeah, so it's safe to say that restarts, even in its origin back in 44th and Paulina, wasn't that, there's this leader who is the savior of this hurting congregation. No. And it's some strategy that somebody wrote on how they're going to, maybe infiltrate or be successful with church planting in a Chicago, in a city metro area. This was more of like, God, what are you doing? Right. And how could we be a part of what you're doing? How do we answer? How do we be the hands and feet of what you want us to do? Right.
Right. It was the message that compelled us, not the methodology. The message of Christ crucified, the message of hope in Jesus, the message of healing and restoration of soul and spirit. That's what drove us. The methodology always changes, and to this day changes. Yeah. I think that's one of our strengths is we've always kind of gone in saying, yes, God, we want to reach as many people as we can, and if we need to change the methodology to do that, we will. And that's kind of how the whole restart thing happened. Now, we've grown over the years. We've learned a lot of lessons.
A couple decades, right?
Yeah, and we've, learned a lot of things in how we do restarts. We're still learning too. We've never arrived. Every restart is distinct. There's some commonalities, but everyone's distinct.
Yeah, and so think about that. Like the first restart, which we can say was 44th and Paulina. That's where kind of New Life became New Life Community Church, right? Pastor Mark came, and then the name of the church changed from what it was to New Life Community
Which,
Church.
by the way, the name was Berean Memorial Baptist Church.
I remember that.
Yeah, and most people were kind of scared of that name. I was too. I was a Moody grad, and I didn't even know what a Berean was. Yeah. Just kidding. But
it's a green Berean, right?
A Berean Memorial. And so, I was there. I remember when we did the name change, and there was no New Life Community Church at that time. That name was not popular at all. Now it's super popular.
Yeah.
But yeah, those were some of the changes and shifts that we were doing restart work. We just didn't call it restart. Multi-site, the terminology multi-site wasn't around at that time either.
Yeah.
So we were pioneering it, but didn't even really know it at that time.
Yeah. So talk about that. So first, was the church in 44th and Paulina, and then we began into, without even knowing the restart terminology, we just began to follow God into these opportunities where we saw maybe churches that were struggling for various reasons, looking for hope and help. And then New Life was able to step in. Talk about maybe one of the early experiences, one of the first stories besides 44th and Paulina. Do you recall what that was? And I'll call that the experiment, right? Because nobody knew what they were doing. We're just kind of like the Braille method, right? We're just kind of feeling this out to see what happens and asking God for wisdom. Maybe tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, I love the God Was Already Here video that we have that's out, because that was our first video. We all look a little bit younger back in that video too, which is always a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were, in the early days, we were approached by Chuck Magruder. It was about 20 years ago. And he was actually an elder at Galilee Baptist at the time on the north side of Chicago, and approached Mark and talked about the idea of how could we come in and help him. Now, at that time, we were here on the south side of Chicago. We thought, do we really, that's a long distance going up to the north side. We didn't at first.
Yeah, there's Cub fans up there. I don't know if we want to go up there.
Yeah, we love Cub fans too there, bro. Like your hat.
They need Jesus, yeah.
Exactly. But anyways, that story began. That was really our first start, where we really began to intentionally began to do restarts, where we stepped in and tried to help the church various ways, made a couple shifts and changes, and we were pleasantly surprised at how much of a positive experience it was. I think a lot of it had to do with just good old Chuck. If you know Chuck, he loves the Lord. He's got his heart on the message of Christ, so methodology was not that consequential to him. There were some adjustments in the music and the preaching and so forth, and just a different interface to the community. And that became a real positive experience. So when the next time came up, which was in Melrose Park in 2001, we were ready to step into that with a little bit more intention. We still didn't really quite know exactly what we were doing. We didn't know who was going to lead it at that time. And that's kind of morphed us into there. But a good positive experience the first time around.
Yeah. And so which location did that end up becoming?
That became New Life Lakeview.
New
Life Lakeview, which was Galilee Baptist Church.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. And so what would you say, what were some of the things, if you can, that's a long time ago, but some of the things that going into that experience, even though it was positive, that you learned that made you feel confident about going into the Melrose Park opportunity? What were some things that, because there's always positive things or negative things, like, oh man, if we could do it differently, we'll do this differently, or hey, this really worked, let's keep that. Were there any things that popped out that you can remember?
I think just the restorative nature of that work of God, the history that was there of Galilee Baptist, a rich and deep history. And when I say history, I mean a faith history of people sacrificing and praying and believing God. And back in the heyday of the 40s and 50s when churches were packed, right? And people went to church. Of course, time shifts and moves over time, but there's something very satisfying of doing a restart, moving towards the grand opening, all the energy and momentum, seeing new people come and stay, and then to see a Chuck in the foyer during a service, tearing up and welling up because the church is full again and people are coming to know Christ. And and I've seen that over and over again, Eric and Danny. I've seen it where elders who navigated through the faith step of doing a restart, oftentimes crying in the foyer as they stand in the back and they look at seeing the church filled with young families and so forth. Yeah. That doesn't always happen that quickly, but boy, it was just something satisfying about it. And I think that's what kind of energized us, saying there is a theology of place. There's a theology of here's a building that's been set here, a design, and by the providence of God to be at that location and to do everything we can to restore that work and make it so that it's contextualized to the community and fruitful.
Yeah,
that got us set up for Melrose Park. But even in Melrose Park, we didn't know for sure. Now Melrose Park was unique because it was a fairly healthy church, but it was transition. It was in transition, and the pastor Scott Nichols, who did a great job there, knew enough to transition it over in a changing community. He knew enough to switch it over, and that's how we kind of, through a series of relationships, got connected. And had a meeting there to transition into new life.
So you weren't really familiar with the community there, and the culture that was.
No, we really weren't. Melrose Park was. I got a phone call from Pastor Mark. I was in the business world at that time, and I got a phone call from Mark, and he said, "Hey, John, there's this little church in Melrose Park." I was like, I didn't know where Melrose Park was. I remember the next day I drove down into Melrose Park to see the church.
Wow.
Just kind of did a drive-by there. And, there was a meeting.
Maybe you should define what a drive-by means.
We are in
This is
Chicagoland, aren't
so-
we?
Yeah.
It was just one of those nice, prayerful drive-bys, non-violent.
Non-violent. There you go.
An exploration
An
drive.
explorative drive.
There you go.
Yeah. So anyways, and met with that group. Ton of great stories there. A powerful supernatural work of God. We just celebrated 20 years.
Yeah.
In September, it was a 20-year anniversary for New Life Melrose Park.
Yeah.
Which was
That's beautiful.
an astounding work of God. From that little location, which we planted, which we had no idea. Like when we went in there was no budget set for it. There was. We didn't have a budget. We just said, okay, let's see how God's going to move. It's like God activity again, right?
Yeah.
We learned from that we needed to make some adjustments and kind of prepare for what the future might bring. But went in there with really no budget and just said, okay, let's just cooperate with God and what He's doing. And there were a couple things that came into play to make that successful. But yeah, so
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, I think one of the things, and Danny, I mean, you're kind of new or currently in a restart opportunity, right? And you just started it at New Life.
Just a few months old.
Yeah, just a few months old. So this will be good. But both of you can talk to this. But how is a restart even considered from as New Life Community Church, the leadership of New Life Community Church? How do we even consider that? What types of have we learned to put on some standards for, yes, we'll move into a situation like this, or no, we don't think we can really help in that type of situation? And I mean, you can even use your current example of what were the green lights that, like, yes, we can do this. And John, maybe you can talk about things we've learned to set up.
I'll give my perspective, and then I'd love to hear yours.
sure.
We were already in the area for in our situation. We were in the area. We had been in the area already for like 6 years in the Logan Square / Humble Park. So we were close. So I was familiar with the culture, with the community, and what God was doing there already. We were doing well. We were moving and grooving. The church was healthy. It was growing. And then, just like John had mentioned earlier, you get phone calls. There's this church or other churches. They hear about our story, what God is doing, and they make a phone call. In our situation, a person who had formerly attended this church knew John, so they gave John the call. And then from that point on, John started the conversation with the elders or the leaders from that location that knew that they just knew this church couldn't die, but yet they knew it was headed in that direction because all their doors were closing, which was interesting because their doors were closing, but yet God saw us and God used us as an open door. So it's almost like God had just preordained this. You know, God has his plan, God activity. He has a plan. So at that point.
Yeah. So help me with the question again.
Yeah. So like, how does New Life determine, or how is a restart opportunity considered?
Right.
So let's say you get a phone call, right, from a church. Right. You know, this also lends to the question, like, have we ever said no? And why did we say no?
Right.
You know, so kind of give us a.
So yeah, again, it comes down to the God activity through a series of relationships. We were contacted by a friend of an elder couple that was at Melrose Park. So they had had a positive experience and said he should contact New Life, and they gave me a call. And over a period of 6 months, we kind of talked back and forth a little bit until I felt like it was ready, you know, for us to maybe take it to another level. And so again, God activity, but also a sense of chemistry. You know, does it seem like this is a group of people that wants to move forward, that is at a place where they really want to move forward, or is it going to be something where we're pulling teeth? That's kind of the distinction between a restart and a classic church plant. Classic church plant, I'm going with my own core group of people, and they all want to start new and are ready to take risks. Restarts are kind of like you're going into changing a church culture. There's reasons why a church gets into a restart situation where it needs a restart. And so there's other barriers you got to kind of overcome that make it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, because you're inheriting.
You're inheriting a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And so anyways, we look for chemistry. That's a piece. You know, that's kind of the whole idea. How does this thing feel? That's kind of an intangible in some ways. Just sometimes you know it. You can sense it. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but we'll look if there's a leader or not. Sometimes if there's a leader there, you know, we'll have to navigate that. And but we're looking for ideally, if it's a situation where there's no leader, and the things. What I mean by that is a pastor. It's a little bit easier to navigate. But if there's a pastor there, we'll look at that. And then sometimes just the economies of scale. Does it make sense to do this, or are we just biting off are we doing a mortgage rescue for somebody?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Now, is that something that we've learned the hard way? Did we ever say yes to something without thinking through those things? And
typically not on that economies of scale, but we have,
because we just sent no money, so there's not.
Well, that's we do send money. We do send money now. In the early days, there was no money for anything. I had to raise money for Melrose. I think I got $2,500 to do a mailing or something, and that's it. We've learned to contribute a little bit more, but even in our context, relative to the nation, what we do, we still do it on a very budget scale.
Very, I would say unconventional.
Very unconventional. Yeah, we'll typically do a restart for right around the $50,000 range, and that's really cheap. So we'll add that in addition to some staff, as availability is there. So it's real important that both churches we've learned that both churches restarts are more expensive than you might think. And it's really helpful to do it on a nice conservative budget, but it also helps if the church that's in a restart situation will contribute to it too, so that together we can kind of pull the funds together and get just a sharper, more robust kickoff. But some things we have learned, I think some things that we do different is typically if there is, and some people might not like to hear this, but it's just kind of the facts. It's a hard thing to say, But if there is a pastor that's at a location and it's in a restart situation, we typically would not pull that pastor into the equation. So we would help them maybe transition out of that spot and start fresh, absolutely fresh, with a new pastor at that work. We've just learned that. I think we intuitively knew it, but we've always had a tender heart to say, okay, maybe we can make this work. maybe we can make this work with Danny, and then we realize, it's just not going to. And
But he just won't leave.
I know Danny's a hard guy to get rid of.
I'm playing.
No, I'm not leaving.
But yeah, so that's one thing. I think we've also learned that we need to be a little bit more robust. So we actually started over 20 years ago. We started right when we started getting into the second or third restart. We thought, okay, we need to make some budget adjustments and start making a contribution towards a church plant.
How do we do that? Let everybody know.
So now we have a percentage of our budget. 10% of every location's budget goes towards missions. There's part of that goes towards foreign missions and our work outside of the country, and then there's a part of that goes towards home missions, which is our Restart Fund. Or not our Restart Fund, our church planting fund.
Yeah.
So that's for church planting and restarts.
Yeah.
And
so it's all encompassing.
It's all encompassing, right? It's all encompassing, and every restart, every New Life location makes a contribution back to the church planting fund. Yeah. So it's a perpetually filled all the time. So that now, when we are in a situation, we're not like biting our nails figuring out how we're going to do a 30,000 mailer, to the community, or how we're going to get. Like when I was at Melrose, the sound speaker was from the 1950s. It was a box about 12 by 12, and it was bolted onto the ceiling, and that was our sound system.
Wow.
So praise God, I remember praying, God, we need a sound system, and I got a gift for $3,500. Somebody that didn't attend, not even from Chicagoland, wrote a check, $3,500. I went to Guitar Center, said I need this, and that, and it came out to being like 35 or 34.9 or something like that. It was just a few cents below the number. Boy. It was a God thing, and we were able to get a fairly good speaker system there.
Yeah.
But we've learned, so that's a positive thing, in that regard. So
yeah, and so once we kind of get a call, right, and maybe there's an initial conversation with one of the elders of our church or pastors from our church or leadership team, right. We bring that back to the team. How then is as a decision made, to move forward with that? Is it after a string of conversations with this church that's looking for a restart, or like where does the green light come from, and how do we work through that as a team, as a church?
Well, yeah, the green light. Danny, you can speak into this too, but the green light. The green light comes over time. It's kind of a process. Sometimes it's red right out of the gate. Yeah. Sometimes it's yellow, and then it starts to become more green or starts to become more red, depending on a series of conversations. Yeah. Those conversations will be typically, it'll be, okay, we're interested in chatting. I'll sometimes have an initial phone call. Just recently, I had 5 months ago a phone call with the church that wanted to do a restart, which, by the way, post-COVID here, we're getting a lot of restart calls. So the timing of this podcast is pretty good. Yeah. Because I think it's going to get the message out that there are other options than just selling your building. Yeah. Who knows who's going to scoop that building up or that property, that sacred space. Yeah. It could be something that you really don't want it to become. Yeah. Or that you regret that it became that kind of place. So it's through a series of conversations. And then typically we'll have a face-to-face with the whole congregation and chat. First, we'll meet with the elders. We'll then maybe meet with the whole congregation, have a talk, a Q&A, bring in somebody who's had an experience with restarts. And as they're getting comfortable. It's kind of like dating. They're getting to know us. We're getting to know them a little bit, and then we just finally come to that place. And there's all this underneath of all this. There's this admin engine, central services at New Life, that's kind of navigating through some of the legal and contractual kind of issues, all the paperwork side of it. Yeah, which there's a lot there. Yeah, and so all that's happening at the same time and begins to move towards agreement. But here's the thing: we never push ourselves on anybody. We say, we want to be invited in. Yeah, we're not going to force ourselves to be here. As a matter of fact, we're looking for and we want you to invite us. So we're not even going to come in and meet with you until you invite us to do it. We're not going to force ourselves and try to have this kind of corporate mentality. So we want to be invited in, and we go in with an open hand. Yeah, here we're going in with an open hand, saying, God, you could make this thing go in a different direction. We're okay with that. If you want it to become part of the New Life Restart fold and part of that kind of team approach to ministry and evangelism and disciple making, then absolutely. But it's an open hand relationship. I think that's important to understand. And I think also just to know that we were invited in as opposed to us. We're not going to strong arm anybody. We'll walk away, and we have walked away from certain situations. I remember one restart potential talking to a guy, and I'd never met them before. I was invited in. I was real excited to have a chance to talk to them. And again, what excites me is more the glory of God, and I'm not being petty here or cliche-ish. I'm being serious. It's the glory of God, and it's evangelism, a means to tell people about Jesus, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm excited about that. The building and such and the crowns is more of a headache than it is anything, but it is a nice tool to have.
Ain't that right, Danny?
Yes.
Those buildings know.
Amen.
They're a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
And I remember just this fella, I think he was the head guy and head elder and just almost was argumentative with me. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm just here to talk and explore this. And I walked away from that thinking, man, there's no way we're going into this.
Yeah.
No way. Who needs that headache? Is this what it's going to be like for a young pastor that we put into this location? He's going to be constantly fighting this guy, and I've just only met him for like 20 minutes.
So that was a red flag.
That was a big red flag, and I pretty much came back and said, this is not one we want to go with, guys.
Yeah.
And
So what are some other red flags in your experience, and this isn't to drop names or anything, but it's just more of like someone's listening and saying, hey, what red flags should we be looking for when we have an opportunity like this through our conversations? First starting with maybe the person that reaches out, maybe red flags that you found in dealing with the congregation and seeing how maybe decisions are made and if we really want to step into something like that. What are some of the red flags?
I think red flags are going to be an inability to recognize and come to terms with why you became a restart in the first place. And that's important because if we're going to be, the pastor that's coming in is going to have to be a change agent. He has to come in and he's going to institute a ton of changes. And if he's fighting,
and that's hard, right?
That is
it's
hard.
hard.
Right, because you want to be loved. I mean, I remember, one location I really, I'm coming in trying to institute change, but I also I'm the new pastor, so I want to be loved and liked.
Yeah.
And I'm also welcoming in all these new people that are getting to see an activity and want to come in. But I remember just, it was a constant fight with, and resistance to bring about much needed change so the church would actually grow. I remember I had diarrhea for 2 weeks. No, I was sick for 2 weeks.
Oh man,
and I'm being a little vulnerable here with everybody out there. But I just was, my stomach was sick because of the resistance that we encountered, and it was truly meant to be a work of God. There was so much God activity that it overcame. There was so much momentum in God activity that it overcame the resistance, but it didn't make the resistance any easier.
So resistance isn't a red flag.
Well, it can be a red flag. Like that one meeting, the very initial meeting was like, whoa.
Yeah.
This is probably the reason why the church is in a restart situation.
Yeah.
Because there was resistance right out of the gate. And I'm like, who needs this?
Yeah.
We don't, maybe you can feel more comfortable with somebody else, but this isn't something that New Life would walk into. So there's that. And if it feels like it's a mortgage rescue or something like that, we'll walk away from it. Those are some of the different things. But you have to go in, eyes open, because every restart is unique, and restarts are hard work.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
They're just hard work.
Yeah.
What would you say is like, obviously there's the, I'll call it a spirit of discernment, right? In meeting with people, but that's really heavily dependent upon our ability to be listening to what God might be saying through these interactions, right? Because we have said no, and for reasons, right? Or we have walked away from things, and I know of a story where in our history where the vote was done and it was going to be a restart, and then we gave it back,
Right.
When we didn't have to, but we did.
Right.
Because we didn't want to force ourselves into something. We wanted to be invited, right? And these values are important for the hard work that we know would be ahead, right?
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. People get, restarts are a faith venture, and faith involves taking risks and chances.
Yeah.
And it's hard. People resist change. It's just in our nature. I resist it myself, and I understand if you're part of a church for 3 decades and your kids were baptized there and you were married there, maybe your kids are married there, and there's so many memories, and then we shift it so the church doesn't die and become a mosque or something.
Yeah, and then they take your pew away and they put
And
a
then
chair there.
Take your pew, take your chair. That's my pew.
Yeah.
That's my pew. No new people are allowed to sit there. This has been our chair for. Can you believe they're sitting in my chair? Right, they're sitting in my pew. That's
Right.
my pew. We don't want any new families sitting there. And those are things you deal with.
Yeah.
So it's risky. So people are afraid, but you have to constantly remember that there's some God movement taking place.
Yeah.
I remember at Melrose, in the very first year that we were there, first 8 months. Of course, we changed the music around. We took down the 3M projector, overhead projector.
Overhead projection, yeah.
So we dismantled that, and I still wish we had it, kind of, in a way. And we changed the music up. So we got drums and bass guitar, and we made the music a lot more relatable to unchurched folks that were living in the community. It was a lot more contextualized to the community, which was 60% Hispanic, a large African-American community in the Maywood area. We contextualized it. Joshua Hollick at that time was my protege. He was a Moody student, so he's 18, 19 years old. I'm in there with young kids, and we jump into this thing. And one Sunday, Joshua came up to said, "Hey, Pastor John, some of the older folks want to meet with you tonight." I said, "Well, tonight? Yeah, they want to meet with you tonight." And so I said, "Okay." It was a 6:00 meeting. And Josh was there. I pull up, and the parking lot's packed.
Oh man!
Just jammed. Joshua comes up. John, there's like 50 people downstairs. There's like 50 people. What are we gonna do? And so he was nervous. I was kind of nervous, but I was not that nervous because I just didn't know what I was getting into.
Right.
I was like kind of gullible. But went downstairs, and there was just like just basically a large group of people. I was almost going to say a mob, but a large group of people, and the key leader, God bless him, what a great man of God, stepped up and said, he's passed away and gone to be with the Lord, stepped up and said, "Pastor, we have a problem with the music." And then for 45 minutes, I stood there. Joshua and I stood in front of that team of people and listened and just let them just pound on us for 45 minutes. I didn't say a word. For 45 minutes, that's a long time.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
5 minutes.
One
is a long
lady in
time.
the back yells out,
minutes of
"You guys are
complaining."
singing 7-11 songs, 7 words 11 times," and that kind of thing. And I just listened to it all. And then when they were done, I just started talking about all the things that God had done in that 6-month period. I mean, the church went from a low number of people to a large number of people, and we started seeing people get saved and baptized. We saw one couple that were on the verge of divorce get their marriage restored and did not get divorced, kept the thing together, and they got out of Jehovah's Witnesses. So I just started talking. I just started telling story after story, and at the end of that key leader, his name was Mario Coldarella.
Mario.
He stood up,
Italian.
and with his cane, he stood up and said, "Pastor, we need to keep the music just the way you have it." And everybody in that room started applauding and clapping.
Wow.
And because they understood the bigger picture.
Yeah.
But it was still risky. It was, they had to take a risk. They
Yeah.
had to take a risk, and we had to move in that direction.
Yeah.
But I navigated it wisely. There was the founding father of the church, so to speak. His son was pastor there for 40 years, and there was a picture of him in the foyer area. And I would call that a sacred cow. It was a sacred cow. I did not take that picture down for like the first 10 years.
Wow.
I left the picture of an old pastor that was on there in black and white image. Nobody really knew who he was, but we still kept it up there with a little plaque, and people would ask about it. And it wasn't until, we had actually redone the foyer area that we took that down. So those are some of the kind of things that help appease the fears and the anxieties.
Wait. Is that the same place with the office, the sacred office?
No, the sacred office was another clandestine.
That's my favorite story.
Yeah, that was quite a story right there.
We got time.
You want to hear it?
It's a great
Come
story.
on.
So there was we do a lot of remodeling when we go into these locations, because we found a lot of the churches just, they look old, they smell old, they're not modernized. So we like to kind of freshen it up with paint, maybe put a couple walls in here and there, tear a wall down or so, redo the children's ministry, make it a little bit more modern and open for new young families. Contextualization, that's a key word. A key word. So there was a beautiful potential foyer area, and I thought, man, this would be a great welcoming area for the church and for new people coming in. But the fact of the matter was that area was there was a pastor's office that was built in that area, so it took up the majority of that area, the foyer area. And I said, we need to tear this down. But I knew it was the location where I had an upset stomach for a couple of weeks, and I'm making all kinds of decisions. I mean, again, for the pastor that's coming into a restart, he really needs to take on the mindset of a change agent.
Yeah.
You can't go in there all timid. You got to be able to make decisions and move rapidly. Do it graciously, do it sensitive.
Yeah, not a bulldog.
Not a bulldog, but kind of like a bull in a china shop. A little bit. You got to be able to make executive decisions and rapid ones, because you're moving towards a grand opening deadline. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, I said to the contractor who was there, I said, we need to get this down. And he goes, okay, not a problem, Pastor. I said, but we need to do it today. It needs to get down. He goes, I said, we need to do it tonight. He goes, no problem. I have my small group of guys. They would love to come in here and demolish this thing. So that night, under this clandestines, we went in there and
like a bunch of secret agents.
It was kind of like Gideon. We snuck in there at night, tore down the altar.
I love it.
And then you walk in the next day and it's gone. Nobody could argue with it.
Wow.
And that is one of the most beautiful foyers of all the New Life locations. You walk in there, it's like it was meant to be this beautiful gathering place. Why? Because it's not about the building, really, is it?
Right.
It's about people. So let's make the building comfortable for people and make it a place where people gather. That's designed for people to gather. And that's one of the most beautiful foyers in all the New Life locations. But again, it was so the contractor at the end of that project, he gives me a sledgehammer with a broken handle. He goes, here, this reminds me of you. He goes, you know when to hit soft and you know when to hit hard. And that's like a trophy. Now that brother's gone to be with the Lord. That contractor just recently passed away, but he gave me this, and I still treasure that. I don't want to get a new handle for it. I like that broken, ragged edge, So, but again, it kind of goes to the question that you had.
It's risky though. Like I like what you said about that, about taking risk. Danny, you're right in the middle of this, just a couple months in, man. Talk to us about risk.
We took lots of risks. In fact, I made numerous phone calls to John during this restart. It pretty much was a restart. And I love the whole idea of not just restarting a church or a ministry, but really a culture.
Yes.
We had to restart because the community. There were a lot of cultural drivers that were clear in the community, but the people in this church refused to change. They wanted to keep, that's the whole sacred cow, they wanted to keep what had been there for 20, 25 years. And we're coming in and saying, well, no, everything's changing and it's changing fast. So in regards to taking risks and making decisions, I'm with you too, because I was nervous and angry in numerous occasions because there was so much kickback, but yet there was like, we want to invite you into what's happening, but we want to keep it like this. But we're inviting you, and they would push back. And so there was a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
And there's like, well, what are you guys saying?
And what's neat about that is that Danny wasn't all by himself.
Right.
He was able to, and that same thing for me at one of the restarts was, I was the pastor, and it was recognized that I was the pastor. So the New Life team came in and did a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Which freed me up to be the nice guy.
Yeah.
Which freed me up to be the pastor, the shepherd. Which a lot of the people, especially older folks, are have a hard time with it because it's scary.
Yeah.
And I understand that. And I compassionately understand that.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful is now a lot of these restarts are not only changing and looking more like the neighborhood, but they're also, so they're not only multi-ethnic, but they're also multi-generational. And that's one of the greatest assets we have as a church.
And that's uncommon, I would say.
Yeah.
Very uncommon.
Yeah, we do not go in and do a funeral service. Say what was done in the past, it's over with, done. We actually go in to a restart and say we're just continuing on what God has started here 70 years ago.
Yeah.
And so against lawyers' advice,
Yeah.
because it's more philosophical in our understanding, is lawyers that tell us you need to cut that entity down, any kind of liabilities that are with that entity, get it so that it's non-existent anymore. We say, no. This is like a marriage. We're getting married here. We're continuing the work of God, so we're going to take on all the liabilities too.
Yeah.
If there's this from way back then, it needs to get. Now we do a good search. We do it wisely. If it's too crazy, then we start to really evaluate and ask, is this detrimental to the overall New Life family? Then we may walk from it. But we do take on that again against lawyers' advice and say we're going to continue on as so. For example, Elgin Bible Church is now New Life Community Church, but Elgin Bible Church still exists, so to speak. Mm-hmm. It still legally exists, but it's now as New Life Community Church. Mm. You follow me?
Yeah.
So when I get up on a Sunday morning, I can say we've been doing ministry here at this place for 70 years.
Yeah.
And we're standing on the shoulders of those who sacrificed and prayed. Elgin Bible Church was founded by an evangelist from Canada who was doing a Bible study at the Elgin Watch Factory.
Wow.
And that morphed into a little Bible study that was in a automotive shop with a mud floor, and then eventually there was enough money gathered where they were able to buy the acreage where the church is at right now. But that history is so important to the congregation, and it's real important to the charter members, so to speak, that actually founded the church, sacrificed and gave, and it's a beautiful thing. That's why I love Restarts, because really it's about recognizing sacred space and coming in and restoring it.
Yeah.
But it takes risks and it's hard. Here's the other point. Sorry, I'm on a roll here.
No, go ahead.
But another point is to understand that restarts are not a magic bullet. Restarts involve sweat. Every incremental point of growth, whether it's in numbers or finances or whatever it is, involves sweat. It involves tears. It involves blood. It involves sacrifice.
Yeah.
And it's you have to work. Everybody has to step up. It's not like just New Life comes in and everything's going to be great and I can kind of sit in the pew and just kind of observe. No, everybody steps up. Why? Because we got company coming.
Yeah.
We got guests coming.
Yeah.
We're inviting 60,000 people in the surrounding communities to come and join us for this grand opening. Some of them will be well-wishers. Some of them will stay. Some of them will come to know the Lord like they did on the grand opening on Sunday. It was Alec and Maria who came to know, Mark and Maria who came to know Christ on our grand opening day.
Wow.
At New Life Elgin. So that kind of thing happens. But go into it with the understanding that it's not a magic bullet. It doesn't just happen overnight. It just doesn't. It's work. And it stays and continues to be work.
Yeah. You mentioned something, and Danny, you can speak to this too. When specifically at New Life, for those listening that are thinking about or asking questions about, restarts, how does New Life do restarts? When we say yes to a restart, that location pastor who steps into that role, which our next episode is gonna heavily talk about that. That location pastor doesn't step into that situation alone, right. And that's one of the strengths I would say about our team is that. Not only is there a pastoral team with wisdom, a phone call to someone like you, John, who's been through this, multiple times and has tons of experience in this, and you got someone like Danny who can call you and ask, hey, how do I do this? But also, I want to highlight what we call central services, because I think that's a huge, huge aspect to why we're able to be the pastors, loving the people, working through honoring the legacy of the location, and not getting bogged down on the bills and how things are paid. Central services is a huge, huge help, I would say, to the location pastor and the pastoral team. So talk to us a little about that. You mentioned about 10%, of our each location contributing, but there's another 10% right, that goes towards central services. And talk to us
Right.
about that. Danny, talk to us about how, central services and the man, Kent Richardson, everybody needs a Kent. We'll talk about that.
Everyone needs a
I think we
Kent.
should have an entire
Yeah.
series,
Kent.
all right, about how every church needs a Kent, because he really is
Yeah.
he's amazing. So talk to us about central services, your experience, and how it's helped you.
Central services for me was key. And the word central services is a general term of a lot of gears, just these moving gears. Central services for us pastors, launching pastors or restart pastors, is like the transmission to an engine. There's so many gears that are so powerful. We had Kent, but man, we also had Shirley, and we had Isabel, and we had Irene, and all of these people were key people who took care of different aspects of the whole launch or the whole relaunch. They took care of things that I had no idea or no information about, but they're like, just give me the paperwork and we'll take care of it from our end, and you take care of what's important. John kept on reminding me, Danny, your job is keep that relationship fresh. Keep the relationship alive, be the pastor, use your giftings, and then they took care of the rest. And in that process of me discovering this community, this area, these people, a whole nother different type of church. There was a Spanish church. I had to keep on learning people, and then I would go back to John, say, John, I bumped into this roadblock. What do I do? How do I manage this? Or there was one situation where the situation was too big for me to handle, because it got personal, because I'm a pastor, a personal guy, and so I called them, and it was so cool because hours later they were ready, and it was you and Pastor Mark. It just showed up, and we had to do it via Zoom. All this was happening during pandemic, by the way, which was a miracle of miracles, that we were able to relaunch a church during the middle of a pandemic, and everything still fell in place.
Yeah.
So central services and the team. Let me bring back another idea that I don't want to miss is, as a launching pastor, it was so good for me to know I had a powerful team that was right behind me, supporting me, moving me, encouraging me, equipping me for every step I had to take.
Yeah.
It was profound.
Yeah, well, so the different aspects too, and for someone listening to this, right? You have your pastoral team,
Yes.
right? People like John. You have John's also a coach at New Life, and so you have a coach, right? Somebody who's able to speak into you as a location pastor. But then you have the strength of this team, Central Services, which is dealing with a lot of the legal things, communication
Yes.
things,
And the
financial things,
budgets.
right? Irene, kind of like HR, when it comes to paperwork and filing things and
legalities.
yeah, all of that stuff. And every New Life location puts forward, right, money towards that monthly to hire basically that team, which services every location at New Life Community Church, right? John, talk to me about that.
Well, which means, for example, New Life Elgin was, when we had that grand opening, it was a time for everybody to celebrate.
Yeah.
Why? Because everybody participated in it.
Yeah.
Not only did they pray, not only did they tell people about it, but they also, part of our offering goes to help towards home missions. So we tithe off of our offering 10%. And part of that goes towards home missions, which is our church planting and our restart fund.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things when we start a restart, we try to provide several different things for that particular location. One of those things is a roadmap, so to speak, where we set the date of the grand opening at a certain point, and then we kind of reverse engineer it. So this is the grand opening. Okay, so we need to do this right before this, all the way up to the very first, where we're doing prayer walks and having prayer meetings on the front end of it and kind of planning. But with all that, so we provide the roadmap. The pastor's plays a big part of being the lead guy on that. He may also be working with the contractors to help do the restart, which is cool about the Chicagoland area is we have a lot of contractor connections, so we're able to get good pricing. We're able to get teams in there rapid. It's not like we're way out someplace where there isn't contractors around, and we're able to use a lot of guys within our own church. So we're able to provide that upgrade in the building because of our connections. But then again, like you were saying, there's this whole central services piece that's freeing up the pastor from admin. Because imagine all the administration.
Amen. Can we all just say that?
Yeah.
Amen.
The pastor's freed up from all the admin, and he's able to focus on what's the most important, which is for the pastor, is it's building relationships.
Yeah.
You've got to get in there and build relational equity with the core team that's existed there for years, who's taking a risk, feels vulnerable, a little bit scared. And then you have a bunch of new people that start coming. They see the activity. I remember at one location we were doing a bunch of construction and stuff, and it was right on the corner of a neighborhood. It was in the neighborhood, kind of like a parish, so to speak, but it was right on the corner. Somebody said I was astounded by this. My picture was all on all these postcards. Somebody said, "Hey, you're the pastor, aren't you?" They recognized me from the postcard. But then they said, "We didn't even realize."
Star, man.
Yeah, well, no, it's a good for throwing darts at that picture. But they said we didn't even realize there was a church here. Think about that.
Wow.
The church was open and existed, but nobody realized it was a church until they started seeing it.
Are you saying that they needed just a picture of a nice, handsome Italian man to recognize there's a church there? No.
Probably, yeah, no. And then, at that particular location, I remember one of the first decisions I made was to take the sign down that was in the parking lot that was nailed to the building that said, "No ball playing." In this parking lot, the kids in the neighborhood weren't allowed to play ball. I said, take that sign down. They're welcome to play ball here. Put a piece of plexiglass up there to protect the window. Boom. But they're allowed to play ball in this neighborhood.
There you go.
Cool. It's just, let's recognize that we're a church in the community and we're interfacing. So, but that's just a little side story.
Sure.
Yeah. But so we do all the admin, all the central services, okay, which is legal interface with lawyers and that kind of thing. But we also provide the leader with a coach, so he's able to navigate, like Danny was saying. We do all the preparations for the grand opening, so we include funding, some minimal funding, $50,000 or so. We're also paying for the lawyer fees, okay, and that kind of thing. So, and we do that reverse engineering, which is really an important piece where we have a schedule for marketing, we have a schedule for construction, we have a schedule for how we're going to do the grand opening, which is usually a big to do. It's like a big party.
Yeah.
We're able to coach the pastor on talking about vision and navigating them through that. So that's another, going back to why I'm excited about Restarts. It's not only restarting a church, but it's also providing and placing a new pastor into a congregation where he's a part of a team, where he's a lot less able to fail.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It's not a silver bullet, but he's in a context where, man, we're doing everything we can to see you win.
Yeah.
And then we try to provide a core team. So if there's locations around that particular new restart, we'll say, hey, we'll hive off. Maybe we'll hive off 15 people from New Life Oak Forest and some from Homer Glen, and we'll do a new replant.
Yeah.
So we try to provide a core team, along with, if possible, no promises, a worship team.
Hey.
So we set things in place. We have our worship
leader residency,
residency. We have some pastoral training, helping with the leadership pipeline and that kind of thing. So
yeah, those are important, and kind of what you're saying too, like with these training up of leaders, right? You really are at every moment, every location pastor or us at New Life, when we think about restarts and the type of grit, I'll say, right? The type of grit it takes. Yeah, we got a tremendous team that carries a lot of weight, but that does not relieve the location pastor and the person stepping into that role. They can't be a weak person.
Right.
They can't have soft skin. They gotta have a level of grit to be able to go into a situation like that, because it is hard work.
Right.
And
what I found is, and there's a balance there too between, because when people know you love them, you can lead them a lot easier.
Yeah.
And you can't pretend to love people. People can see through that.
Yeah.
But I think that God does provide a grace upon a pastor, because listen, the Lord loves his church.
Yeah.
He walks among the churches. He's so acquainted with the church. He realizes, that this is a tender moment and this is hard, and some people are going to have a real hard time with it. But I think he graces that pastor to really love people supernaturally. Gives a passion for that, compassion. And I think when you have the compassion and the competence piece to be able to navigate as a change agent, you really get someplace with a location. But there is that supernatural element, and so I found that true in my own life, and I've seen it over and over again in different locations that we've pastored.
Yeah. Now, I've been a location pastor now for 4 years, but I grew up in New Life, and actually my kind of rise within leadership didn't start on the pastoral journey, but more on the worship leader side. So me growing up, and you mentioned this earlier, when we weren't recording, but and I want you to talk about it because I think it's so important, of inviting people with potential to sit at the table, right? And kind of you intentionally putting them in sometimes like above their pay grade type of opportunities, I remember going to, I can't remember how many locations I've helped with, but as a younger guy, I remember leading worship. I was at a bunch of different locations helping them out, and I would go there and start a team from the community for the community, and then I'd move on. And it was through that invitation to sit at something that was way bigger than me and to learn things about culture and different locations that I really do believe has prepared me and helped me for the season of life that I'm in right now.
And when you were first invited into some of those higher pay grade, so to speak, situations, did you have a feeling of adequacy? Did you feel like, yeah, man, you felt a sense of how in the world, who am I?
I'm like, what am I doing here?
Right.
There's this, what's the word? It's a complex. I can't remember what it's called. Like imposter complex, right?
Yeah.
Where like, if they only knew I have no idea what I'm doing, they would chase me out of here.
Launching pastors.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for a long time, and still I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing.
And maybe we never feel that we're adequate.
We probably don't, man.
Our adequacy is in Christ. But I totally agree, and I think that something important is arising here when it comes to leadership development, which I think, by the grace of God, has been something that's been passed down to us from one of our fathers, so to speak, which was Bob Job, to be honest with you. Pastor Mark's dad, who was a veteran missionary in Spain, came over and was on staff for just a couple of years, and it was strange having Bob reporting to his son, Mark. But Bob always brought in, Bob passed on, I think, a value to believe in people that most people wouldn't believe in. And that value was in Bob, and was passed down to Mark, and I think I look at myself and think I shouldn't even be a pastor, but God has graciously provided, and that same value has been passed on over and over and over again, and I think I see it in Jesus, picking some of the most least, the most uneducated, the most, it's like, that's just, I love that spirit. And so that same spirit of bringing in just men that are called of God, that have character, they may not have arrived with the greatest experience, may not have the highest education, but are men that are called of God, recognizing that and then giving them an opportunity. That's what I like about Restarts, because what it does is it provides opportunities for guys to get in, even if they're not the lead guy. These are the kind of things, like we were saying earlier, that you don't learn from an education.
Yeah.
These are things you have to be kind of in. There isn't a Restart class in seminary. You have to kind of navigate it. It's about people. It's different, and you have to be in this. So as a lead launching pastor, I've always highly valued bringing guys in that are younger than me or not as experienced and just giving them the shot. First of all, I have some selfish reasons behind it too. I need help. I need help. I don't care who you are. Do you know Jesus, man? That's great.
Are
Okay,
you breathing?
yeah,
Do
yeah.
you love Jesus?
Yeah, you're doing communion day, 'cause, man, I'm wiped out. I'm
John
just
is the
toast.
best delegator in the world.
And for selfish reasons. No. But there is something real important, and I've always been very intentional about this, is to give guys, to take risks, to give guys opportunities to be in situations where they're going to grow and they're going to learn and they're going to be stretched.
Yeah.
And never putting so much pressure on it they feel like obligated to have to do it. But you get a young, hungry tiger in your midst. You need to feed them.
Yeah.
Give them opportunities to. So there's a what Restarts do is provide a great environment to learn on the job training.
Yeah.
I like to think of it as an apprentice.
Yes.
Hey man, come and learn how to solder these copper pipes with me. Hey man, let's learn how to do a circuit of electricity in this room. Hey, let's learn how to install this furnace and put on proper ductwork and so forth. And you're going to watch how I do it, and then you're going to do it, and we kind of move along. And I think Restarts and church planting is a great opportunity.
Yeah.
So that's a real call to the lead launching pastor to be secure enough in himself to take a young guy underneath of him and train him.
Yeah.
We certainly saw it in the life of the Apostle Paul and his relationship with Timothy,
Yeah.
right? And so
There's
when we
so much parallels to what we do, and even this podcast, thinking that this might be some of that coaching for somebody else.
Right.
It's beautiful. There's
it's-
just something kingdom minded about it that excites me.
I think for a lot of our listeners too, what you're observing right now is a transition of a very intentional transition of I wouldn't consider us old, like of
course not.
but
Absolutely
kind of founding leaders intentionally, not because we have to, but intentionally saying we're going to pass this work of God onto the next generation. And you're seeing it even in this podcast, the fact that, you're hosting this, Eric, and you were in my wife's Sunday school class.
Yeah.
I love it, and the fact that you're a peer, you're a peer, you're a pastor, you're a location pastor. That says a lot. And I really do hope that people see what's happening here, because it's unique, and you get to see it from a podcast level, but there's other things, right? But I think the reason I'm bringing this all up in the context of Restarts is because Restarts provide a great opportunity for other leaders to kind of fill in the vacuum, fill in the gap. And that's certainly one thing that we really want to see more of, is availability of leaders. And I think what's offered uniquely here at New Life is the team approach, the relational team piece. And that's a whole nother conversation. Maybe that's a conversation for a podcast in the future of how do you function healthy in a team environment, a pastoral team environment, because that's another, in my opinion, very unique thing that we do here at New Life.
Yeah.
And I hope that we do everything we can in our power to keep it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
What do you think, Danny? Any words of wisdom?
No, other than going back to the whole team idea. I work best in team. I don't do well solo. Whether it's my personality type or anything, but I love working. When I came on staff in 2008, one of the things that attracted me was the team aspect and, of course, the vision. These are two beautiful pillars for me. Phenomenal vision and great team. I was like, man, I want to be part of that. Little did I know what I was really getting into. It's always been a great adventure. But I think for me, one of the most important aspects is team. And it's so diverse and yet so beautiful at the same time.
Yeah, and I think also the bigger question that we could maybe unpackage in the future in a different episode is, okay, we're doing all this work, really hard work, leading up to a grand opening. Grand opening's a big, phenomenal success. It's so much fun. It's so energizing. But then there's the following Sunday.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And now the work begins. Yeah. And that's why I think it's real important to make sure that we're prepping and training the pastors and the congregation where we're doing a restart with the ability to do the right work or develop the right habits, okay, so that the church can sustain the momentum that they gained from the grand opening.
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yeah.
And that means, if we're going to be specific, it means navigating some of the primary systems in a church that keep it healthy: evangelism, worship, teaching and preaching, small groups, assimilation or guest services.
Huge.
It's huge. And there needs to be training
Yeah.
of the congregation that exists there, even if it's just 15 or 10 people.
Yeah.
Training that launch pastor has to have with that congregation prior to the grand opening, so that when grand opening comes, everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
And we have a system. They have on the same page of being friendly and creating a welcoming environment. Okay. But then also having a system down where we're able to follow up. We're able to capture first-time guests' information and then follow up with proper
Yeah.
information about the church and letters and that kind of thing. It's just a whole nother program.
Yeah, there's so much. What we're doing right now in this first episode is we're just opening up the topic
Right.
of what restarts are. There's so much that goes into it. I'm really excited about kind of keeping this conversation going. In our next episode, we're going to be hearing from Pastor Danny Lopez and just this whole restart adventure that he is on currently, but also kind of what led up to that. So, but we'll save that for episode 2. It's coming up. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. We're really grateful that you would listen to the content that we're bringing. It's our aim. It's our aim, our goal, our prayer that this content would be helpful to you, to your church, or maybe to the thinking that you have for evangelism and the church opportunities in your area. But maybe there's someone that you know that needs to hear this podcast. They need to get this content too. It would mean the world to us if you would share this podcast with them. Of course, we'd love for you to subscribe to this podcast so that you can stay up to date with what's happening next and be ready for our next episode as we hear a real life restart story from the perspective of the location pastor, which I think is huge. We're going to try to gather some different perspectives of a restart, and one of those is going to be from the location pastor. So stay tuned, and we'll see you next time.